All right, chapter 22, part 3. Professor James pays great attention in his book to mystical states under narcosis. This is a realm that public opinion and ethical philosophy have long since branded as pathological, though private practice and certain lyric strains of poetry seem still to bear witness of its idolatry. Nitrous oxide and ether, especially nitrous oxide, when sufficiently diluted with air, stimulates the mystical consciousness in an extraordinary degree. Depth beyond depth of truth seems revealed in the inhaler. This truth fades out, however, or escapes at the moment of coming to, and if any words remain over in which it seemed to clothe itself, they prove to be the veriest nonsense. Nevertheless, the sense of profound meaning having been there persists, and I know more than one person who is persuaded that in the nitrous oxide trance we have a genuine metaphysical revelation. Some years ago, I myself made some observations on this aspect of nitrous oxide intoxication and reported them in print. One conclusion was forced upon my mind at that time, and my impression of its truth has ever since remained unshaken. It is that our normal waking consciousness, rational consciousness as we call it, is but one special type of consciousness, whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there are potential forms of consciousness entirely different. We may go through life without suspecting their existence, but apply the requisite stimulus, and at a touch they are there in all their completeness. Definite types of mentality which probably somewhere have their field of application and adaptation. No account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness quite disregarded. At any rate, they forbid a premature closing of our accounts with reality. The whole drift of my education goes to persuade me that the world of the present consciousness is only one out of many worlds of consciousness that exist, and that those other worlds must contain experiences which have a meaning for our life also. Looking back on my experiences, they all converge towards a kind of insight to which I cannot help ascribing some metaphysical significance. The keynote of it is invariably a reconciliation. It is as if the opposites of the world, those contradictions and conflict make all our difficulties and troubles, were melted into unity. Not only do they, as contrasted species, belong to one and the same genus, but one of the species, the nobler and the better one, is itself the genus, so soaks up and absorbs its opposite into itself. This is a dark saying, I know, when thus expressed in terms of common logic, but I cannot wholly escape from its authority. I feel as if it must mean something like what the Hegelian philosophy means. If one could only lay hold of it more clearly. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. To me, the loving sense of its reality only comes in artificial, mystic state of mind. What reader of Hegel can doubt that sense of a perfected being with all its otherness soaks up in itself, which dominates his whole philosophy, must have come from the prominence of his consciousness of mystical moods like this, in most persons kept subliminal. Man, it's a long sentence. I'm going to read that one more time. What reader of Hegel can doubt that sense of a perfected being with all its otherness soaked up in itself, which dominates his whole philosophy, must have come from the prominence of his consciousness of mystical moods like this, in most persons kept subliminal. The notion is thoroughly characteristic of the mystical level, and the Aufgabe, the problem of making it articulate, was surely set to Hegel's intellect by mystical feeling. I have friends who believe in the antitheistic revelation. For them, too, it is a monistic insight in which the other in its various forms appears absorbed into one. Into this pervading genus, writes one of them, We pass forgetting and forgotten, and thenceforth each is all in God. There is no higher, no deeper, no other than the life in which we are founded. The one remains, the many change and pass, and each and every one of us is the one that remains. This is the ultimatum. As sure as being, whence is all our care, so sure is content beyond duplexity, antithesis, or trouble, where I have triumphed in a solitude that God is not above. B.P. Blood, The Anesthetic Revolution, and the Gist of Philosophy, Amsterdam, New York, 1874. Zenas Clark, a philosopher who died young at Amherst in the 80s, was also impressed by the revelation. In the first place, he once wrote to me, "Mr. Blood, I agree that the revelation is, if anything, non-emotional. It is, as Mr. Blood says, the one sole and sufficient insight why or why not, but how the present is pushed on us by the past and sucked forward by the vacuity of the future. It is an initiation of the past. The real secret would be the formula by which the now keeps exfoliating out of itself, yet never escapes. We simply fill the hole with the dirt we dug out. Ordinary philosophy is like a hound hunting its own tail. The more he hunts, the farther he has to go, and his nose never catches up with his heels, because it is forever ahead of them. So the present is already a foregone conclusion, and I am ever too late to understand it. But at the moment of recovery from antithesis, then, before starting on life, I catch, so to speak, a glimpse of my heels, a glimpse of the eternal process just in the act of starting. The truth is that we travel on a journey that was accomplished before we set out, and the real end of philosophy is accomplished not when we arrive at, but when we remain in our destination, being already there, which may occur vicariously in this life when we cease our intellectual questioning. That is why there is a smile upon the face of revelation as we view it. It tells us that we are forever half a second too late. That's all. You could kiss your own lips and you have all the fun to yourself. It says if you only knew the trick, it would be perfectly easy if they would just stay there till you got around to them. Why don't you manage it somehow? In his latest pamphlet, Mr. Blood describes the value of the anesthetic revelation for life as follows. The anesthetic revelation is an initiation of man into the mystery of the open secret of being, revealed as the inevitable vortex of continuity. Inevitable is the word. Its motive is inherent. It is what it has to be. It is not for any love or hate, nor for joy or sorrow, nor good nor ill. End, beginning, or purpose it knows not of. It affords no particular of the multiplicity and variety of things, but it fills the apprehension of the historical and the sacred with a secular and intimately personal illumination of the nature and motive of existence. Although it is at first startling in its solemnity, it becomes directly such a matter of course, so old-fashioned and so akin to proverbs that it inspires exultation rather than fear, and the sense of safety as identified with the aboriginal and the universal. But no words may express the surpassing certainty of the patient that he is realizing the primordial Adamic surprise of life. Repetition of the experience finds it ever the same, as if it could not possibly be otherwise. The subject resumes his normal consciousness only to partially and fitfully remember its occurrence and to try to formulate its baffling import. With this consolatory afterthought that he has known the oldest truth, and that he has done with human theories as to the origin, meaning, or destiny of the race, he is beyond instruction in spiritual things. The lesson is one of central safety. The kingdom is within. all days are judgment days, but there could be no climactic purpose of eternity, nor any scheme of the whole. The astronomer abridges the row of bewildering figures by increasing his unit of measurement. So may we reduce the distracting multiplicity of things to the unity for which each of us stands. This has been my moral sustenance since I have known of it. In my first printed mention of it, I declared, "The world is no more the alien terror that was taught me, spurning the cloud-grimed and still sultry battlements whence so lately Jehovan thunders boomed. My gray gull lifts her wings against the nightfall and takes the dim leagues with a fearless eye. And now, after 27 years of this experience, the wing is grayer, but the eye is fearless still, while I renew and doubly emphasize that declaration. I know, as having known, the meaning of existence, the sane center of the universe, at once the wonder and the assurance of the soul, for which the speech of reason has yet no name but the anesthetic revelations." I subjoin, Professor James says, another interesting anesthetic revelation. This is what the subject, a gifted woman, writes about her experience when she was taking ether for a surgical operation. Excuse me. "I wondered if I was in a prison being tortured, and why I remembered having heard it said that people learn through suffering. And in a view of what I was seeing, the inadequacy of this saying struck me so much that I said aloud, 'To suffer is to learn.' With that, I become unconscious again, and my last dream immediately preceded my real coming to. It only lasted a few seconds, and was most vivid and real to me, though it may not be clear in words. A great being of power was traveling through the sky. His foot was on a kind of lightning as a wheel is on a rail. It was his pathway. The lightning was made of innumerable spirits close to one another, and I was one of them. He moved in a straight line, and each part of the streak or flash came into its short conscious existence, only that he might travel. I seemed to be directly under the foot of God, and I thought he was grinding his own life up out of my pain. Then I saw that what he had been trying with all his might to do was to change his course, to bend the line of lightning to which he was tied, in the direction in which he wanted to go. I felt my flexibility and helplessness, and I knew that he would succeed. He bended me, turning his corner by means of my hurting me more than I had ever been hurt in my life. And at the acutest point of this, as he passed, I saw. I understood for a moment things I have now forgotten, things that no one could remember while retaining sanity. The angle was an obtuse angle, and I remember thinking as I woke that he had made it a right or acute angle. I should have both suffered the scene still more and should probably have died. He went on, and I came to. In that moment, the whole of my life passed before me, including each little meaningless piece of distress, and I understood them. This is what it had all meant. This was the piece of work it had all been contributing to. I did not see God's purpose. I only saw his intentness and his entire relentlessness towards his means. He thought no more of me than a man thinks of hurting a cartridge when he is firing. And yet, on waking, my first feeling was, and it came with tears, Domen nom sum digma. For I had been lifted into a position for which I was too small. I realized that in that half hour under ether I had served God more distinctly and purely than I had ever done in my life before, or than I am capable of desiring to do. I was the means of his achieving and revealing something. I know not what or to whom, and that to the exact extent of my capacity for suffering. While regaining consciousness, I wondered why, since I had gone so deep, I had seen nothing of what saints call the love of God, nothing but his relentlessness. And then I heard an answer which I could only just catch, saying, "Knowledge and love are one, and the measure is suffering." I give the words as they came to me. With that, I came finally into what seemed a dream world compared with the reality of what I was leaving. I.S. Simmons, who Professor James mentions, tells of an interesting mystical experience with chloroform. After the choking and stifling had passed away, I seemed at first in a state of utter blankness. Then came flashes of intense light, alternating with blackness, and with a keen vision of what was going on in the room around me, but no sensation of touch. I thought that I was near death, when suddenly my soul became aware of God, who was manifestly dealing with me, handling me, so to speak, in an intense personal present reality. I felt him streaming in like light upon me. I cannot describe the ecstasy I felt. Then I gradually awoke from the influence of the anesthetic. The old sense of my relation to the world began to return, and the new sense of my relation to God began to fade. I suddenly leapt to my feet on the chair where I was sitting and shrieked out, "It is too horrible, it is too horrible, it is too horrible," meaning that I could not bear this disillusionment. At last I woke, calling to the two surgeons who were frightened. "Why did you not kill me? Why would you not let me die?" Anesthetic states are very similar to those strange moments experienced by epileptics during their fits of illness. An artistic description of an epileptic states we find here in Dostoevsky's The Idiot. He remembered, among other things, that he always had 1 minute just before the epileptic fit, if it came on while he was awake, when he suddenly, in the midst of sadness, spiritual darkness and oppression, there seemed at moments a flash of light on his brain, and with extraordinary impetus, all his vital forces suddenly began working at their highest tension. The sense of life, the consciousness of self, were multiplied 10 times at these moments which passed like a flash of lightning. His mind and his heart were flooded with extraordinary light. All his uneasiness, all his doubts, all his anxieties were relieved at once. They were all merged in a lofty calm, full of serene, harmonious joy and hope. Thinking of that moment later, when he was all right again, he often said to himself that all these gleams and flashes of the highest sensation of life and self-consciousness, and therefore also of the highest form of existence, were nothing but disease, the interruption of the normal condition. And yet he came at last to an extremely paradoxical conclusion. What if it is disease? He decided if the minute of sensation remembered and analyzed afterwards in health turns out to be the acme of harmony and beauty, and gives a feeling unknown and undivined till then, of completeness, of proportion, of reconciliation, and of ecstatic devotional merging in the highest synthesis of life. These vague expressions seemed to him very comprehensible, though too weak. That is, that it was beauty and worship, that it really was the highest synthesis of life. He could not doubt and could not admit the possibility of doubt. He was quite capable of judging of that when the attack was over. These moments were an extraordinary quickening of self-consciousness, if the condition was to be expressed in one word, and at the same time of the direct sensation of existence in the most intense degree, since at that second, that is, at the very last conscious moment before the fit, he had time to say to himself clearly and consciously, "Yet for this moment one might give one's whole life." Then without a doubt that moment was really worth the whole of life. For the very thing had happened, he actually had said to himself at that second, that for that infinite happiness he had felt in it, that second really might be worth the whole of life. At that moment, as he told Rogozin one day in Moscow, At that moment, I seemed somehow to understand the extraordinary saying that there shall be time no longer. Probably, he added, smiling, this is the very second which was not long enough for the water to be spilt out of Mohammed's pitcher, though the epileptic prophet had time to gaze at all the habitations of Allah. Narcosis or epilepsy are not at all necessary conditions to induce mystical states in ordinary men. Certain aspects of nature appear to have that peculiar power of awakening such mystical moods, says James. It would be more correct to say that in all conditions of encompassing nature this power lies concealed. The change of the seasons, the first snow, the awakening of spring, the summer days, rainy and warm, the aroma of autumn, awakes in us strange moods which we ourselves do not understand. Sometimes these moods intensify and become the sensation of a complete oneness with nature. In the life of every man there are moments which act upon him more powerfully than others. Upon one a thunderstorm acts mystically, upon another sunrise, a third to the sea, the forest, rocks, fire. The voice of sex embraces much of that same mystical sense of nature. In the sex impulse, man puts himself in the most personal relation with nature. The comparison of the sensation of women experienced by man, or vice versa, with the feeling for nature is met with very often, and it is really the same sensation as is given by forests, prairies, sea, mountains, only in this case it is even more intense, awakens more inner voices, forces the sounding... Come on. Forces the sounding of more inner strings. Animals often give the mystical sensation of nature to men. Almost everyone has a favorite animal with which he has some inner affinity. In these animals, or through them, men sense nature immediately and personally. In Hindu occultism, there is the belief that every man has his corresponding animal, through which it is possible to act upon him magically, through which he himself can act upon others, and into which he can transform himself or be by others transformed. Each Hindu deity has his own particular animal. Brahma has a goose, Vishnu an eagle, Shiva a bull, Indra an elephant, Kali, Durga a tiger, Rama a buffalo, Ganesha a rat, Agni a ram, Kartikeya or Subramanya a peacock, and Kama, the god of love, a parrot. The same thing is true of Greece. All the deities of Olympus had their animals. In the religion of Egypt, sacred animals played an enormous part, and in Egypt the cat, the most magical of all animals, was held as sacred. The sense of nature sometimes unfolds something infinitely new and profound in things which seem to have been known a long time and in themselves contain nothing mystical. The consciousness of God's nearness came to me sometimes, quotes Professor James. A presence, I might say, something in myself made me feel a part of something bigger than I that was controlling. I felt myself one with the grass, the trees, birds, insects, everything in nature. I exulted in the mere fact of existence, of being a part of it all, the drizzling rain, the shadow of the clouds, the tree trunks, and so on. In my own notebook of 1908, I found a description of the same experienced state of consciousness. It was in the Sea of Marmora, on a rainy day of winter. The far-off, high, and rocky shores were of a pronounced violet color of every shade, including the most tender, fading into gray and blending with the gray sky. The sea was the color of lead mixed with silver. I remember all these colors. The steamer was going north. I remained at the rail, looking at the waves. The white crests of waves were running towards us. A wave would run at the ship, raised as if desiring to hurl its crest upon it, rushing up with a howl. The steamer heeled, shuddered, and slowly straightened back. Then from afar a new wave came running. I watched this play of the waves with the ship and felt them draw me to themselves. It was not at all that desire to jump down which one feels in mountains, but something infinitely more subtle. The waves were drawing my soul to themselves, and suddenly I felt that it went to them. It lasted an instant, perhaps less than an instant, but I entered into the waves and with them rushed with a howl at the ship, and in that instant I became all. The waves, they were myself. The far, violent mountains, the wind, the clouds hurrying from the north, the great steamship heeling and rushing irresistibly forward, all were myself. I sensed the enormous heavy body, my body, all its motions, shudderings, waverings, and vibrations, fire, pressure of steam, and weight of engines were inside of me. The unmerciful and unyielding propelling screw which pushed and pushed me forward, never for a moment releasing me, the rudder which determined all my motion. All this was myself, also two sailors, and the black snake of smoke coming in clouds out of the funnel. All. It was an instant of unusual freedom, joy, and expansion. A second, and the spell of charm disappeared. It passed like a dream when one tries to remember it, but the sensation was so powerful, so bright, and so unusual that I was afraid to move and waited for it to reoccur, but it did not return. And a moment later I could not say it had been, could not say whether it was a reality or merely the thought that, looking at the waves, it might be so. 2 years afterwards, the yellowish waves of the Finnish Gulf and the green sky gave me a taste of the same sensation, but this time it was dissipated almost before it appeared. The examples given in this chapter do not by any means exhaust the mystical experience of humanity, but what do we infer from them? First of all, unity of experience. In mystical sensations, all men feel definitely something in common, having a similar meaning and connection one with another. The mystics of many ages and many peoples speak the same language and use the same words. This is the first and most important thing that speaks for the reality of the mystical experience. Next is the complete harmony of data regarding such experience, with the theoretically deduced conditions of the world causes, the sensation of the unity of all, so characteristic of mysticism, a new sensation of time, the sense of infinity, joy of horror, knowledge of the whole in the part, infinite life and infinite consciousness. All these are real sensed facts in the mystical experience. And those facts are theoretically correct. They are such as they should be according to the conclusions of the mathematics, of the infinite, and of the higher logic. This is all that is possible to say about them.